Round 2, lightning round, question 1. In one of this composer's works, the King of Clubs tries to save princesses trapped in the titular fruit, and another of his works uses a bassoon to depict the grandfather of the title character. For 10 points, name this Russian composer of the Lieutenant Kijé Suite, The Love for Three Oranges, and Peter and the Wolf. The answer is Prokofiev. Question 2. This holiday calls for drinking until the phrases Blessed be Mordecai and Cursed be Haman are indistinguishable. For 10 points, name this Jewish holiday which is celebrated on the 14th of Adar that celebrates Esther's victory over Haman. The answer is Purim. Question 3. These structures are connected to basal bodies, and in eukaryotes, they have a 9 plus 2 arrangement. For 10 points, name these tail-like cellular structures that provide movement, which are generally longer than cilia. The answer is flagella, or flagellum. Question 4. This painting features a broken sword at its bottom, a horse being stabbed with a spear, a woman weeping over the body of her child, and a light bulb in the shape of an eye. For 10 points, name this work depicting the bombing of a Basque town during the Spanish Civil War, which is by Pablo Picasso. The answer is Guernica. Question 5. This organ helps digestion through use of the duct of Versing, and this organ produces hormones with its islets of Langerhans. For 10 points, name this endocrine organ that produces ghrelin, glucagon, and insulin, whose beta cells are disabled by diabetes. The answer is pancreas. Question 6. The 10th part of this work argues against the formation of factions, and this work was printed under the pseudonym Publius. For 10 points, name this group of documents arguing for the ratification of the Constitution that were written by John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. Answer is the Federalist Papers. Question 7. This author wrote a short story about a character who, when asked to do work, replies with, "I would prefer not to." He also wrote a work about impressed seamen on the HMS Bellipotent, and another of his novels begins, "Call Me Ishmael." For 10 points, name this author of Billy Budd and Moby Dick. Answer is Herman Melville. Question 8. Some of the subranges of this mountain range include the Pocono, Catskill, and Black Mountains. For 10 points, name this mountain range whose namesake trail is spanned by Springer Mountain and Mount Katahdin that begins in Georgia and ends in Maine. Answer is the Appalachian Mountains. Question 9. This man's presidency saw the passage of the Underwood Tariff, and he was opposed by Henry Cabot Lodge. For 10 points, name this president who is the only president to have a Ph.D. that proposed a League of Nations in his 14 points. The answer is Woodrow Wilson. Question 10. This event saw the traveling Brotherhood of the Flagellants reach great popularity. For 10 points, name this event that was thought to have reached Europe through the Silk Road that killed 1 to 2/3 of the population of Europe in the mid-1300s and was spread by black rats. The answer is the Black Death, or Plague. Prompt on bubonic plague. Tossup and Bonus Round. Question 1. This composer wrote a cantata in one act about the outcasted Azael returning to his parents, Leah and Simeon, which is known as The Prodigal Son. The pieces The Snow is Dancing and Gollywog's Cakewalk appear in this composer's suite, Children's Corner. He composed a piece which contains the movement Dialogue of the Wind and the Sea, and was inspired by a Stéphane Mallarmé poem to compose a piece of the same name. Another of his works is the third movement of his suite Bergamasque. For 10 points, name this French Impressionist composer of La Mer, Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun, and Clair de Lune. Answer is Claude Debussy. Bonus for 5 extra points. Name this other French Impressionist composer who worked with Debussy and composed Pavane for a Dead Princess and Bolero. The answer is Maurice Ravel. Question 2. When spacetime is flat, this quantity is the Noether charge of translational invariance. The quantum mechanical operator for this quantity is -I times h bar times the gradient, and Planck's constant divided by this quantity gives the de Broglie wavelength. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle defines limits on how accurately position in this quantity can be known for an observable system. The change in this quantity is known as impulse, and its time derivative for this quantity is force. For 10 points, name this measure that is always conserved, which is symbolized p and is the product of mass and velocity. Answer is linear momentum. For 5 extra points, name the quantity that is the cross product of position and linear momentum, which is symbolized with the letter L. The answer for that is angular momentum. Question 3. A reverend known as Dr. Chasuble renames one character with the name of another character. That character attempts to act as the protagonist's younger brother to charm a ward known as Cecily Cardew, and the protagonist proposes to Gwendolyn Fairfax. The ruse is ended when a handbag belonging to Miss Prism is produced by the protagonist. In this play, the title character is forced to admit living a double life when his cigarette case is discovered. For 10 points, what is this play in which Algernon Moncrief is visited by his best friend, a man he knows as Ernest Worthing, a play by Oscar Wilde? The answer is The Importance of Being Earnest. For 5 extra points, what is the only published novel by Oscar Wilde about a painting by the character Basil Howard that reflects the title character's sins? The answer is The Picture of Dorian Gray. Question 4. The age of the surface of this object is estimated to be between 20 and 180 million years old due to the lack of apparent cometary bombardment. One of its features was earlier classified as a macula, but was later identified as the multi-ringed impact crater Tyre. Other features on this object include the Connemara Chaos and the 26-kilometer Quill crater. And along with Rhea and Dione, this moon is one of the only satellites to have prominent lineae on its surface, which is due to gravitational stress from its planet and other moons. For 10 points, name the smallest of the 4 Galilean moons of Jupiter, known for its icy surface and possible internal liquid ocean. The answer is Europa. For 5 extra points, what is the largest of the Galilean satellites that is also the largest moon in the solar system? The answer is Ganymede. Question 5. This man was appointed the surveyor of Greenwich Naval Hospital and the surveyor of Westminster Abbey, and he improved and extended the Kensington Palace. This architect's first major project was the Chelsea Hospital, and his first commission as an architect was the refortification of Tangier. Aside from designing the Royal Observatory and the library at Trinity College in Cambridge, this architect was responsible for the rebuilding of 51 churches, the most famous of which was a church destroyed in the Great Fire of 1666. For 10 points, name the English architect that designed the rebuilding of St. Paul's Cathedral. The answer is Sir Christopher Wren. For 5 extra points, Wren was a close associate of what man who used a microscope to view a cork and coined the term cell for biological organisms? The answer is Robert Hooke. Question 6. Viral infection, glucose deprivation, and disturbances in redox regulation cause this organelle's namesake stress. This organelle makes use of SNAP and SNARE proteins to embed proteins into its membranes, and it receives vesicles coated with COP1 and sends vesicles coated with COP2 to the Golgi apparatus. Its internal space is known as its lumen, and sarcoplasmic variety of this organelle is found in striated and smooth muscle and serves to regulate calcium levels, while another variety synthesizes proteins. For 10 points, name this organelle that comes in smooth and rough varieties and forms a transport network. For 10 the answer is endoplasmic reticulum. For 5 extra points, endoplasmic reticula are classified as either smooth or rough, depending on whether these organelles are present on the surface. The answer is ribosome. Question 7. This thinker who wrote a book known as The Holy Family critiques the Bauer brothers and other young Hegelians. This author of Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right wrote that philosophers merely interpret the world when they should change it in his Theses on Feuerbach. Another work by this author terms the monetization of social relationships as commodity fetishism and sets out a system known as the labor theory of value. His most famous work interpreted history as a series of class struggles. For 10 points, name this German philosopher who wrote Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. The answer is Karl Marx. For 10 points, for 5 extra points, name the man who collaborated with Marx on several of his works, including Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. The answer is Friedrich Engels. Question 8. The increase of world temperatures has allowed for better survival of tree-damaging insects in this biome, such as the larch sawfly and aspen leaf miner. The typical soil of this biome is the difficult-to-farm soil. However, another type of soil in this biome is common to bogs and is known as muskeg. This biome experiences low precipitation, but the evaporation is lower, allowing for dense vegetation. Some of the trees that grow in this biome include the white spruce and the Douglas fir. For 10 points, name this biome that is the world's largest terrestrial biome that covers Canada, Alaska, Scandinavia, and Siberia, and is characterized by coniferous forests. The answer is taiga, or boreal forest. For 5 extra points, name this biome that lies above the tree line that is found throughout the Arctic and is composed of lichens, mosses, and shrubs. Answer is tundra. Question 9. Because the growth of the Alaudae never stopped, this figure tricked the brothers, Otos and Ephialtes, into killing each other. This figure turned the mother of Arcas into a bear, saved Iphigenia from sacrifice, and killed the children of Niobe after she boasted about having 14 children. She sent a boar to Calydon after King Oeneus had forgotten her harvest sacrifices and killed Orion after he tried to seduce Opis. After she was caught bathing, she turned Actaeon into a stag, so his hunting dogs would kill him. For 10 points, name this Greek goddess of the hunt, depicted as a huntress carrying a bow and arrows, whose Roman equivalent was Diana. The answer is Artemis. For 5 extra points, name the twin brother of Artemis, who is the Greek god of poetry, medicine, and the sun. The answer is Apollo. Question 10. This group was sighted at the Lizard in Cornwall, and the news of this group's presence reached London through a system of beacons. When the Marquis of Santa Cruz died, Medina Sidonia took his place as leader of this group, and this group was attacked by hellburners designed by Giambelli, which were used at the siege of Antwerp. Supported by Pope Sixtus V, this expedition saw its first engagement at Gravelines. This force was defeated by John Hawkins and Francis Drake, and a great storm known as the Protestant Wind. For 10 points, name this massive naval force that was led by King Philip II and failed to invade England in 1588. The answer is the Spanish Armada. For 5 extra points, name this figure who was the Queen of England when the Spanish Armada attacked, that gave the Tilbury speech to encourage her troops. Answer is Elizabeth I. Supertossup Round, Question 1. During this conflict, the Act of Accord led to the imprisonment of Lord Montagu. In one battle of this conflict, Lord Audley failed to prevent the Earl of Salisbury from reaching Ludlow Castle. In addition to the Battle of Blore Heath, this conflict featured the death of the Earl of Somerset in a surprise attack against Warwick the Kingmaker at St. Albans. In this conflict, Edward IV gained the throne after defeating the forces of Margaret of Anjou at Tewkesbury, where Henry VI was killed. His son was later killed in a battle that saw the defection of the Stanley family and was the last English monarch to do so, ending with Richard III's defeat at the Battle of Bosworth Field and the ascension of Henry VII. For 10 points, name this English dynastic conflict between the houses of York and Lancaster. The answer is the War of the Roses, or Wars of the Roses. Question 2. In one of this author's works, Georg Bendeman jumps off a bridge after his father sentences him to death by drowning. In another, an ape named Red Peter tells the story of his transformation. This author of The Judgment and A Report to an Academy also wrote of the loss of public interest in feats of fasting and The Hunger Artist. One of his novels tells of Kay, who tries to mysterious authorities in the castle, and another relates the imprisonment of Joseph Kay, who is never told why he was arrested. In addition to the trial, this author wrote a short story about a machine that inscribes a person's crime upon their body, and a novella about the death of Gregor Samsa. For 10 points, name this author of In the Penal Colony and The Metamorphosis. Answer, Franz Kafka. Question 3. In this opera, one character promises another that they will be married in Per ti rivego. Earlier, that character sings Se quel guerrier io fossi, about gaining victory for his beloved. One character realizes that she is in a love triangle with the title character in Vieni o Diletta, and in Morir mi Sinto, that character scorns Ramphis for condemning her fiancé. This opera ends with the duet O Terra Addio in the vault of the Temple of Vulcan. The titular character has conflicting thoughts about an upcoming war in Ritorna Vincticor, and her father, Nasro, condemns her after she sings O Patria Mia and refuses to betray her lover, who is betrothed to Amneris. For 10 points, name this opera about the titular Ethiopian princess who is buried alive with her lover Radames, a work by Giuseppe Verdi. The answer is Aida. Question 4. The protein frataxin is localized to this organelle, which is mutated in Leigh's disease. This structure contains coenzyme Q and uses the TIM-TOM complex for translocation of proteins. These organelles appear as ragged red fibers in Kearns-Sayre syndrome, and they release cytochrome C to trigger apoptosis. Responsible for the color of brown fat, the DNA of this organelle can be used to trace matrilineal descent. Enzymes that oxidize pyruvate are located in the matrix of this organelle, whose inner membrane folds into cristae. Lynn Margulis thought that these organelles were protobacteria that underwent endosymbiosis. The site of the Krebs cycle, an electron transport chain. For 10 points, name this powerhouse of the cell. Answer is mitochondria. Question 5. According to one character in this novel, the dream of a child is a sure sign of trouble. In this novel, a symbolic chestnut tree is struck by lightning, and the protagonist befriends a girl who is reading Rasselas and later dies of consumption, Helen Burns. The title character of this novel inherits £20,000 from her uncle in Madeira and declines to go to India with St. John Rivers. As a child, the protagonist stays a night in the Red Room and goes to school at Lowood. Later, she tutors Adele Varens and returns to Gateshead to visit the dying Miss Reed. Thornfield Manor is burned to the ground by the attic dweller Bertha Mason, enabling Mr. Rochester to marry the titular character in, for 10 points, what novel by Charlotte Bronte? The answer is Jane Eyre. Question 6. A fresco depicting this man's coronation is in the Stanza dell'Incendio del Borgo in the Apostolic Palace of the Vatican. Albrecht Dürer painted a portrait of this man accompanied by a similar portrait of Emperor Sigismund, and this man employed the scholar Alcuin of York and the biographer Einhard in his court. This leader crossed the Alps to defeat the Lombards at the Battle of Pavia, and his rear commander Roland lost to the Basques in the Battle of Roncevaux Pass. Childeric III was deposed by this man's father, Pepin the Short, ending the Merovingian dynasty. This Carolingian ruler crowned his only surviving son, Louis the Pious, co-emperor in 813, before dying in 814, and his lands were divided in the Treaty of Verdun. For 10 points, name this king of the Franks whom Pope Leo III crowned Roman emperor on Christmas Day in year 800. The answer is Charlemagne. Question 7. This man composed a work similar to Buxtehude's Strecone in C minor, that is known as this composer's Passacaglia in C minor. This man composed a work that he later transposed to D major to give the trumpets better sonority in his Magnificat. He also composed a work which Glenn Gould was especially famous for playing, whose 16th part is a miniature French overture, and another of his works accompanies the words of Jesus with the entire string section to create a halo effect. This composer wrote an organ piece called Toccata and Fugue in D minor, as well as the Goldberg variations in St. Matthew Passion, and he wrote a collection of solo keyboard pieces called The Well-Tempered Clavier. This man also composed 6 concertos in dedication to a certain Margrave. For 10 points, name this composer of the Brandenburg concertos. The answer is Johann Sebastian Bach, or J.S. Bach. Question 8. The Ponleve paradox showed that rigid body dynamics are inconsistent when taking into account 2 types of this quantity. The Prandtl-Tomlinson model uses this force's namesake parameter, and charges can move from one object to another due to an effect caused by this force known as the triboelectric effect. Amintons wrote 2 laws concerning this force, which states that this force is directly proportional to the applied load and is independent of area of contact, and its dry variety is independent of velocity according to Coulomb's law. Viscosity can be thought of as a fluid variety of this force, and its effect can be reduced with the use of lubricants. This force is equal to its namesake coefficient, denoted as mu, times the normal force. For 10 points, name this force that resists the motion of materials against each other and comes in static and kinetic varieties. The answer is friction. Question 9. This author wrote about Aylmer's inability to accept his wife Georgiana's title blemish in the short story The Birthmark. He also wrote a short story about the title scientist's tests on the waters of the Fountain of Youth on 4 people, as well as a short story in which Reverend Hooper refuses to take off the title garment, and both stories appear in his collection Twice Told Tales. This author of the short story Dr. Heidegger's Experiment and the Minister's Black Veil wrote about Donatello's resemblance to the title sculpture in The Marble Faun, and another of his novels deals with Miles Coverdale's love of Priscilla. This author also wrote a novel that sees Hester Prynne have an adulterous affair with Arthur Dimmesdale, which forces her to wear an A for the rest of her life. For 10 points, name this author of the Blithedale Romance and the Scarlet Letter. The answer is Nathaniel Hawthorne. Question 10. This man wrote a work about the cultural conditions of Europe which contained on the use and abuse of history for life, and was called Untimely Meditations. This man published a book of aphorisms entitled Human All Too Human, and this philosopher wrote a work with chapters such as Why I Write Such Good Books. This philosopher wrote a work where he reintroduces the concept of eternal recurrence, and he wrote another work that discusses the dichotomy between the Dionysian and Apollonian. This author of The Gay Science and the Birth of Tragedy wrote a work that begins with the title figure descending a mountain and used the image of a tightrope Walker to describe mankind. For 10 points, name this German philosopher who wrote Ecce Homo and Thus Spoke Zarathustra and created the ideas of the death of God and the Übermensch. Answer is Friedrich Nietzsche.